Good evening and welcome once again to the Irish NFL show. I am Mark Harry Potter Cockrell and joined this evening by my good friends Colin Ron Weasley Cronin and Brian Hermione Granger O'Leary. Gentlemen, it's a magical evening. Good to see you both.
Yes, indeed, Mark. Obviously, they're running into Christmas and plenty of exciting games to look forward to over the coming days, and lots to discuss this evening.
Brian, is the Christmas magic in the air for you? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like you have some magical quotes to come this evening, judging by the opening lines on this show. They're saying this could be one of the coldest weekends in NFL history. And just when the season is really warming up in terms of who's going to make the playoffs, some teams are going to play in their coldest ever game in their NFL history. So very interesting to see picks tonight, because I imagine come Monday, if the weather gets a hold of these games, we'll see very different results to what we expect.
Absolutely. And we've got a busy weekend ahead with the Christmas Day games. We've got football on 4 nights this week with Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, another Christmas treat. But gents, before we get into the games and the future that we're looking forward to, there have been a couple of sad passings in the wider NFL community and family in the last few days in the run-up to Christmas. Probably, Colin, most surprisingly, given the young age of the gentleman in question, Ronnie Hillman, a former Broncos running back who I think passed at only 31 years of age there.
Yeah, really sad. Obviously, I mean, 31 is no age at all, and a guy who, you see the talk about him on Twitter, what a great teammate he was. His best year was actually the year the Broncos last won the Super Bowl in 2015, and he was a big part of that, rushing for nearly 1,000 yards, played in Super Bowl 50 as well. But word came earlier this week from a couple of his teammates, former teammates in Denver, Orlando Franklin and Derek Wolfe, that he had been taken into hospice care. He'd only been diagnosed earlier in the year with a rare form of liver cancer, and unfortunately just didn't, there was really no chance for him with that. But a guy who, when he was drafted, was actually drafted ahead of Russell Wilson. John Elway took a bit of stick for drafting him because he wasn't the biggest running back in the world, but he had a decent career with the Broncos, was a key part of the Super Bowl winning team, and obviously will be missed by fans, but most importantly by his family. And it's good to see kind of the entirety of the NFL community coming together to acknowledge what a tragedy it is for all of those who knew him. And look, our thoughts go out to him. It's really tough to lose anyone at any time. It's especially tragic, I think, when it is a young person, and it is very, very difficult, I think, when it is just before Christmas. So definitely our thoughts are with Ronnie Hillman's, all of his loved ones.
Absolutely. And I'd like to continue extending thoughts and prayers, not just to the friends and family of Ronnie Hillman, but also those of Franco Harris, who also left us earlier this week. For those of a more vintage generation, I would say, certainly one of the fundamental faces behind that famous Steelers side during the 70s, winner of 4 Super Bowls. We often laud the amazing Steel Curtain and the defense. You see Terry Bradshaw, who was a quarterback in the league when quarterbacks weren't the most important thing on the shows, but really what drove that offense was their running game, and especially their running game behind Franco Harris. As many will know and would have seen in the tributes paid to him, if you didn't already know, he is, of course, the famous recipient of the most famous play in the history of the NFL, the Immaculate Reception. As this is an opinion, this is voted in 2019 as part of the NFL's 100-year celebration, which, in the week we've just had, I suppose, with Raiders fans celebrating a rather unbelievable end to one game, was certainly an unbelievable end to a key championship game back there in the 70s. Obviously, at the different end of the spectrum, he passed at 72, had long innings, had been obviously close with the whole Pittsburgh community all the way through, and a key part of, as I say, those 70 teams, but that link to the past. For younger or newer fans of the NFL, you'll see the Immaculate Reception repeat on that famous advert for the NFL 100, where Franco gets the ball off the deflection, much in the same way it happened in that famous game against the Raiders. And the Steelers, obviously, at that time, were the curse of John Madden's Raiders in a few years gone by. So a very famous face, notable face for the Pittsburgh Steelers community as well. And sorry to start on such a somber note, but I think it's only appropriate as we cover so many angles and so much part of the NFL to acknowledge the contributions made by both those men. So with our thoughts and prayers with them and their families, it is important sometimes as well to remember that football can be a distraction from the sadness and the reality of life. And we obviously as fans do treat it that way and allow it to kind of provide some hopefully light in the day. We were starting with the Magic themes, Brian, but I think we've got so many games to get through with the way the schedule falls. We should really start with the first game that's going to come up later this evening, Thursday Night Football. And I come to you first on this, Brian, about the Jags at the Jets. Both of these teams are actually looking to be where Ronnie Hillman and Franco Harris were before, which is in the playoffs. Both these teams, Jags are now just one game behind the Titans. We talked about they control their destiny. And the Jets, obviously on a bit of a losing streak at the moment, but they're still only one game outside of that wild card race. The weather could be wild at MetLife, but is this game going to be wild tonight?
Yeah, they're expecting really, really bad weather at this game tonight, which kind of shows out the form in a way, because despite the difficult losses for the Jets recently, they're still in the position, as you said, to make the playoffs. And defensively, they've been very impressive throughout the course of the season. It's going to be a really difficult task for Trevor Lawrence. You know, he's coming off a game last week where he had 503 total yards against the Cowboys defense, which was really exposed last week. And they're going up against a defense that, I suppose, has held their own this season, despite the difficulties in which they have with offense. You know, the starting situation with Zach Wilson as quarterback. Then obviously Mike White coming in. Mike White's been injured. At one stage, Joe Flacco was playing. So there's been a lot of upheaval offensively. But one thing we can say is defensively this season, they've been fantastic. And, you know, you got Sauce Gardner, you know, arguably Defensive Rookie of the Year. And they're going up against a team right now that are on a crest of a wave in the Jags. They've won 4 of the last 6 games. Trevor Lawrence is finally starting to show the potential that we always knew he had after the craziness of last season. This weather thing really does worry me. I'm looking at the stats. I'm looking at the games in which the Jags have played over the course of the years, and they haven't won a game under 10 degrees of weather Celsius for us in 8 years. It's gone back that far since they've gone on the road in difficult circumstances and played well and won. And right now, like they're doing really well. They've got players like Zay Jones, who, you know, we kind of underrated wide receiver. He's really stepped up the last few weeks. We saw it in Tennessee. We saw it last week in the big game against the Cowboys. It's a difficult one. I'm really torn on this one. I mean, they're one game back on the Titans. The Titans now essentially have ruled out Tannehill potentially for the rest of the season. They're going to be running with Malik Willis, and they're going to play through the final week of the season. The Jags have got to keep going. Zach Wilson is playing. Something tells me Jets win a very close one. I thought they'd win last week. To be honest, I felt they threw the game away last week with the 14 inches touchdown, not getting his hackling on the tight end. Then obviously the bad, we spoke about it on Monday's show, around the play calling at the end with the timeouts. You know, they could have put themselves in a better position to win that game. It's one they'll feel they let go. I don't think they'll let go tonight. I think they'll find a way to get past the Jags and win this game and keep their season alive in terms of making the playoffs.
Colin, do you have faith in the Zach attack?
I don't, and I think we're going to be off tonight to straight away. There's been a lot of games where we have been in harmony, in a unison over the past couple of weeks. Maybe this weekend will not be the case, because for me, I think both teams. I think, look, if maybe the Jets had their full, like, we weren't injured at running back, maybe it'd be different. Breece Hall, I think, was such a difference maker for them. But while they're still effective, and Brian Rightly points to how good their defense has been, I think Zach Wilson is going to really struggle to move the ball in this sort of weather. And talked about it on Monday's show. This has been a season where the Jags have broken the different sort of streaks, their inability to win on the road, their inability to win on the West Coast, all of those sorts of things. And we saw some of the stats come out during the week. So Trevor Lawrence is PFF's highest graded quarterback since week 9. If you look at the stats since week 9, even getting some love from Nick Wright, who generally only gives the love to Patrick Mahomes. So that was funny. But since week 9, in terms of passer rating, 111.2, first in terms of completion percentage, over 70%. And in terms of touchdown to interception ratio, 14-1, he is first in all of those. So it's not just PFF saying it, it is the stats to back it up. And you can see it with your own eyes, the way in which he has grown and matured, the decision making. And for me, as impressive as the Jets defense has been, I just think they're going to struggle with Zach Wilson to score enough points. And that is, as I can tell you at my own team, that does not allow you to win football games. I wonder, and I think it will be intriguing to see what the Jets might do with the QB situation in the offseason. That's one to keep an eye on. I think this will be a very low-scoring game. I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets were to win it. Absolutely, they could. I just think in this league, the best QB tends to win, and the best QB in this situation is Trevor Lawrence. So it's the Jags for me.
Yeah, as I alluded to, the Jets are on a 3-game losing streak, and maybe you wouldn't blame necessarily Zach Wilson for the loss against Detroit last week, but there were a lot of things we analyzed that went wrong at the wrong time for them. And I'm with you, Colin, on this. Like, their defense is impressive, but we also have to give due credit to how the Jags' offense has been clicking last while. 40 points against the Cowboys cannot be sniffed at. And if the weather is wild, I do still like the Jags being able to run the ball. I do still like Trevor Lawrence's arm more so than Zach Wilson's tendency with his mechanics to throw off the back foot. Remember a dodgy, windy game between Buffalo and New England last year, and it was like a bazooka versus a BB gun in terms of Mac Jones throwing in the wind and Josh Allen throwing in the wind. And maybe it's not quite as bad as that, but I would do a similar comparison between Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence tonight. I certainly know who I'd rather be throwing the ball in inclement weather in that regard. So look, it's 2-1. Brian, you're the lone wolf tonight because I'm going to go with the Jags on Thursday Night Football as well. Moving swiftly on, however, gentlemen, as we turn our attention to Sunday, first game we're going to look at here is the Falcons at the Ravens. And two little things to mention here. Mr. Ridder is going to be on the road for the first time as the Falcons continue to evaluate him. If you are interested in going on the road next year to the NFL, do please pre-register your interest with our partners at Cassidy Travel. They're taking pre-reg interest with your team and your interests now even. So you'll see that link in our bio on YouTube. You'll see that link connected on various social media sites as well. So do please do that. So while he goes traveling, however, let's try the Magic theme. Unfortunately, Lamar Jackson's injury history has declared a curse of Avada Kedavra, if I remember my Harry Potter correctly, on the Ravens' playoff hopes in years gone by. Again, Colin, Lamar Jackson is injured, and whereas the Ravens a couple of weeks ago looked like they were almost nailed on for the division title, they've lost. Jackson isn't starting again tonight. We've got the wonders and delights of Huntley confirmed. Sorry, I say tonight. Sorry, Sunday confirmed to start again. Actually, sorry, Saturday. This is how confused I am about these games now. There's too much football. It's Christmas. I'm completely confused. Whenever and in whatever geographical location and time zone this is being played, Huntley will be starting against Desmond Ridder on the road. Colm, please save me from my misery here and release this confluxing spell that I'm under.
Well, given that we're on the Christmas games as such, I'll go with the Christmas hat, and I'll sort that out in a minute. Look at that. With this one, I don't think either of these teams will be high flying. The Ravens, it feels very similar to last year. We've talked about that. Lamar gets injured towards the end of the year, and the wheels just come off because he is their offense. He is their best rusher, and he is a great passer. He worries defenses in a way that Huntley just doesn't. And Huntley is a competent backup, but he's a backup QB, and that is a huge issue for this team. These are in, I think they're 2 and 3 in terms of rushing yards. But for the Falcons, the big advantage they have is that even though Marcus Mariota is no longer the QB there, their top 2 rushers are their running backs. And ultimately, I think that is what could make the difference. I think we might well see some surprises this week. This is another of the cold weather games. And it just feels like without Lamar, you lose a huge leader and you lose your quarterback. And it just feels like things aren't quite right there. Again, it wouldn't shock me at all if the Ravens were to win this, but I am going to say that it is going to be an upset and that the Falcons and Desmond Ridder are going to actually get the victory. But it won't be based off of him. It's going to be on their running backs.
Yeah. And Brian, you've got the stat running there, obviously, about how the Ravens can secure a playoff spot. But probably the bigger question for them is keeping up with the Bengals to get the right playoff spot in terms of that home advantage.
Yeah, big weekend last weekend with the Browns beating the Ravens, and obviously the Bengals going into Tampa and winning. Bengals now top of the division. This game, like, we looked at these two offenses over the past few weeks, and they're stuttering. We called it out over the past few weeks, in particular around the Ravens games. Home to the Panthers, on the road in Jacksonville, up and down. Last weekend against the Browns. He's fixing the hat, I assume. Last weekend against the Browns on the Saturday night, didn't do a lot. And there's been this kind of narrative for a while that Huntley could potentially be the right answer for the Ravens if Lamar Jackson was to move on. If the contract wasn't secured. I think we've seen enough now at this stage to recognise that's not the case. I think the Ravens will win more so because I think Ridder's in for a difficult day with the defence of the Ravens stepping up. Both these two teams combined for 21 points last weekend. We're not seeing a lot out of the Ravens offense. We're not seeing a lot out of the Falcons offense. It'd be interesting to see how Ridder can do again in another road game for him. But I think bearing in mind where the Ravens are at and the opportunity to potentially make the playoffs this weekend, albeit securing a wild card with the games that are at hand elsewhere, I think the Ravens will find a way to win this game.
It is not always guaranteed that just because they should have more to win out of this, that they come through. Looking at you, Indy, last year against Jacksonville, for example. But let's not forget, gentlemen, the Falcons have a lot of interest in this as well. They're only a game out of the division in there. Are we allowed to call it a division? Embarrassment might be the appropriate word. In the NFC South, which is potentially this weekend going to confirm, if the Bucs lose, that the winner of that division will indeed have a losing record, and thus joining the ignominy of the 7-8-1 Panthers, the 7-9 Seahawks, and one other losing division winner that I can't remember at this point in time. It's a very, very low and ignoble list, albeit, of course, the Seahawks gave us that amazing home playoff game where they unleashed beast mode. It is hard to see, true beast mode, the beast quake, I should say. It is hard to see any of these NFC South teams, whichever eventually stumbles to the finish line, unlocking anything of that nature. there's been a great job, do not get me wrong, by Arthur Smith and the coaching staff and the Falcons of what they've turned around this year in particular. But John Harbaugh can't allow another meltdown. Huntley has shown glimpses. The Ravens are by far the more talented team across the board. And, even though I make all those points for the Falcons and what they've got to play for in this regard, I will take the Ravens over the Falcons. I'm not quite sure Ridder's there yet, and it's not the nicest environment to go into on your first away game as well. Certainly be difficult with their defense, to say the least. I'm also loving Column's Cup that made an appearance just during that, as well as the Moose Antlers, which are now duly fixed. So we've got a good Christmassy night ahead. Anyone, again, watching on the podcast is going, what the hell is going on? Are they talking about? Then you have to check out the show on YouTube to see the full effect of what Colin's bringing to town today. Moving on, gentlemen. Now, there's only one reference that's relevant here. Harry Houdini himself must be the reference, because the Detroit Lions have not just escaped a 1-6 purgatory, they've got an amazing winning streak and run. They've got the potential now to go for 7 wins out of their last 8. They showed a great performance against the Panthers. They showed a great performance the last couple of weeks, and now they're bringing this form on the road to Carolina. The Panthers season, albeit, Steve Wilkes was making the case, obviously, to take the permanent job there and looked like he was getting some great performances out of that team, even after they traded the farm away and basically thrown in the towel on the season. Now that season is over. They really want the draft position more than anything, especially with the poor performance last week, dropping at home to the Steelers. Realistically, guys, is this not about the Lions and their continued wild card push and the Panthers' slow, inexorable climb out of the Matt Rule? I'm trying to be polite. Reindeer droppings that were left behind. Colin, I'll come to you. Let's start with you on this one. Lions at the Panthers.
Yeah, look, for me, I suppose the head coach of the year contenders I think there's 4 in it, and I think Dan Campbell is one of those 4. The way in which he has changed the culture. How many times on this show have we talked about Detroit as the factory of sadness? And this year they have become the game's great entertainers. Look, I feel a little bit for Steve Wilkes, because it's really difficult when I talked about it last week. This is a team who are on their 3rd start in QB. They traded away Christian McCaffrey. Robbie Anderson forced his way out. So it's difficult for Wilkes. But the Lions are on such a good run. And the other thing that happened this week were the Pro Bowl announcements. And one player who didn't get it, who was snubbed, was Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, if people out there know anything about Amon-Ra, it is the fact that he takes things personally. He can list off all 16 wide receivers who went before him in the draft. Earlier in the season, ESPN didn't include him in a list of the top players under 25. He promptly went for over 100 yards in each of the next 2 games, those games being the Bills and the Jags. So the fact that he has been snubbed should be of significant concern to the Carolina Panthers, because he is going to want to prove a point. And he's pretty good when it comes to proving a point. I think this will be, I think that the Panthers will want to respond after a disappointing showing last week. But I think ultimately for them, they're going to have an entirely new QB room next year. I would imagine it's not going to be anyone who's on the current roster. And I think that the Lions and Dan Campbell have the playoffs in their sights. And so I am going to say that the great entertainers continue to entertain and they get the win.
Mark, just as you were leading into this game, you suggested this is more so about the Lions and the Panthers potentially should be considering their position for the draft come April. But the reality is,
they're in the NFC South as well. I know. So
no. Well, look, we're all guilty of what we think of the NFC South. But like the reality is, right now, if they continue to win or find a way to get themselves in a position come week 18, they play the Bucks. I know it's on the road. The Bucks have lost quite a few games at home this season. It's not a daunting place to go. They just need to remain one game out, play the Bucks, beat them. They've beaten them earlier in the season, and they'll be in the playoffs. So I get it. Like they're not like they really should be figuring out what's the plan, and they should be looking at the draft position. But the way they're playing, even if they finish the season and win the division with 6 or 7 games, they're still going to be in the top 12 picking in the draft. So like there's going to be 4 or 5 quarterbacks. Anyway, that's for April. This game. I picked the Panthers last week. I felt they would. They ran a bit of a crest of a wave. The momentum was building. They just won in Seattle, and of course, we saw the letdown game. The letdown game was because the Steelers found a way to essentially stop this 3-headed monster which they've had in the run game, which is Blackspear, Foreman, and Hubbard. And when it came down to Sam Darnold trying to essentially win the game on his own with the likes of DJ Moore and Terrace Marshall in terms of their wide receivers, couldn't get it done. The Lions' defense, to me, is the biggest factor here over the past few weeks. We talked so highly of their offense throughout the course of the season. Since they played the Packers, whatever went off that day when they played the Packers at home and only gave up 9 points in that game, they've literally turned the corner. They played the Giants the following week in MetLife. They did a really good number there. In fact, the only team in the last 6 weeks that have really put up any numbers on them is the Bills. And in fairness to the Bills, they put up big numbers on every team. So it's the defense for me which is created this run, and I'm with Colin. I think the Panthers will rebound and play a lot better than they did last week, but ultimately I think the Lions offensively have too much at the moment. They're averaging 31 points a game. I know it's dropped off slightly recently, but now they're finding ways to win games in tougher situations where they don't have to put up 30 points. This weekend I think they will find a way to put up good numbers. I can't see the Panthers living with them. So I'm with Colin. I think the Lions will win and march on towards the playoffs.
No, they absolutely. And look, it's a good call out about the Panthers because I was just calling out about the Falcons. Like, you kind of look at their record and think they're out of the running, but of course, that division keeps everybody interested. Saints as well, across the board. And, you got to have a ticket to win the lotto. So even Panthers fans are saying, well, if we get to the playoffs, and you never know. So we will see how it all transpires. I'm fascinated by a couple of things there. I mean, Brian, you rightly called out the Detroit defense. I mean, even that game against the Bills, which they lost, and the Bills only put 28 up on them, as we said, for a little bit of better time management at the end of the first half, the end of the game there in that Thanksgiving game, it could have been theirs. And it was the first time we saw a really competitive, it felt like a really competitive, down to the wire Thanksgiving game in Detroit for a long time. And not just the Giants. They held the Jags to 14 points as they hockeyed them a few weeks ago. They held Minnesota to only 23 points in their offense as they won that game. And I think under 20 points last week as well. So that defense has been clicking entirely. And Colin, Amun-Ra, of course, the supreme deity in the Egyptian religion, fused with Ra, who was the sun god, but Amun was actually the supreme deity. Some people overlook. His father gave him that name, I believe, because his consciousness of African culture, etc. But what a great combination. And he is going to be A, talented, and B, very motivated, as you rightly call out, by any slight that he can take advantage of. And that fusion, just like his name is a fusion, will undoubtedly power this Lions team at the weekend as well. I mean, you could make an argument Jared Goff is overdue throwing a game away because he's always usually good for one or two of them, and he hasn't been. He's been one of the good news stories and the kind of the bounce back seasons. If we talk about comeback player of the year, you could make an argument he's up there considering how low he was last year, but we all know that's going to Geno Smith, or maybe, Brian, I know there's some betting angles on this, but maybe Christian McCaffrey is in the mix as well. We'll come to that later on. For me, I'm going with Detroit. I know a few Lions fans are absolutely buzzing about what Dan Campbell's building up there and how they're evolving. Maybe it's not going to be this season, but they've got a run and a chance at that wild card, and they are going to go to town and try to run it in. So that's a full house? Has the curse been duly applied? That's all right. It's all right. Amon Ra will reverse curse with his Egyptian name, so it's okay. Players are in, however, from now. Next games, we look at a couple of magicians for sure. These guys happen to be magicians with the football, however. First is Lucy, maybe he's the
Mark, you have turned into a Dalek on Christmas. We know that the BBC love to run a Doctor Who special, and it would appear to have arrived early to Mark Cockrell, as I have my reindeer antlers and Mark has turned into a Dalek. Can you hear us, Mark? No, he is fully frozen there. We are just a couple of years on from being unable to avoid those frozen songs. But maybe Mark has thought out now.
I don't believe so. I think he was calling out Colin, and I think we'll pull Mark back in a second. I think he was calling out. He was leading into the Bills game, which is he's back. He's back.
Exterminate.
The joys of live shows, huh?
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I was just calling out Josh Allen being a magician. Chris Angel is where I was going with in comparison. A good-looking guy who can do it all in terms of close-up or more spectacular feats in the same way Josh Allen can do it with his feet or do it with his arm. Brian, I was going to come to you to break down this game and give us your thoughts on, Josh Allen's performance, but also obviously Justin Fields, who can definitely do it with his feet, maybe less proven still with his arm.
Sub-zero temperatures, wind chills, and gusts of up to 40 miles an hour are the forecast for this game. It's going to be a common theme throughout the course of this weekend. Look, I do like Justin Fields. I probably come across as I don't. I did say on the show on Monday that he only threw for 91 yards last weekend. I'm just making the point. Can't continue running the guy. He'll get injured. Look at Lamar Jackson at the moment. He can't continue to stay healthy every year. And a lot of that's down to the fact that he's a running quarterback. They need to find players and allow him, and they need to find an offensive line, because Colin rightly called out on Monday, there's a couple of statues in front of him there, which isn't helping the situation. It'll be helped this weekend by Khalil Herbert coming back. He's a really significant running back for him. I know Montgomery gets a lot of the talk, but when he's played this season, they were averaging 31 points. The drop off since he was out injured, 18 points a game. He's a big player. He will relieve the pressure on this Bears team, I think. And in a game where the weather will be so adverse and the throwing conditions might be difficult for both quarterbacks, even Josh Allen in this instance, it'll be great to have a two-headed monster that the Bears can rely on to go up and down the field. Every game which the Bears have played at home, with the exception of one game this season, they've kept it within a score. They have played really well, but unfortunately keep coming out of the wrong side of the results, which Bears fans are probably liking at the moment because they want that second pick come April. For the Bills, it's continuous. They have played in difficult weather recently. We saw that in the Jets game. We saw last Saturday. I felt they got away with one last Saturday against the Dolphins. I thought the Dolphins were the better team and more deserving of the result on the night. But the Bills have to win to maintain this number one seed. I'm going to go with the Bears to cause an upset in this game. I think the Bears have been playing really well at home. They've been, like even last week's game, the Eagles didn't play to the standard we've seen, and they held their own. And if teams could have went a different way, I think the Bears are due a bit of luck. We saw it in week one when they played the 49ers, who are arguably the second best team in the NFC. The weather was terrible, miserable, heavy rain. They found a way to win. In a game where difficult conditions this weekend, I just have a sneak that the Bears are going to cause a shot. Colin called out last week, I believe, that we all just assume these teams are going to beat these teams, in terms of who's going to be the AFC 1-2 seed. We saw the Chiefs last week nearly get turned over. We saw the week before with the Texans and the Cowboys. So why not? I think the Bears will put up a performance and win this game on Sunday. Big shock.
Little Tim coming with the Christmas miracle, courtesy of Brian O'Leary there. Christmas Carol coming to fruition. Colin, are you equally in the Christmas spirit towards the city of Chicago?
I'm a big fan of Justin Fields, and I think this is where Mr. O'Leary and I disagree. I think pocket passers can get just as injured. Ryan Tannehill, his season is over. Kenny Pickett, Colt McCoy. Colt McCoy is not a Russian QB. Some people may question why Colt is still in the league at this point, but Colt is now out. I think that injuries can happen. And I think as long as Fields can continue to do that, let's enjoy watching it, because it was phenomenal. That touchdown that ultimately got called back last week because he stepped out of bounds was one of the more kind of scintillating runs and one of the most exciting moments of the day. And we said it repeatedly. For the Bears, it was all about finding out, was he the guy? Yes, he's the guy. Scoring points and then putting the pieces around him. The Brennan is, I mean, I don't think it'd be an enormous shock, because the Bears have been doing well. They traditionally do well in cold weather games, and their current head coach played in one of the coldest games, I think, when the Cowboys went there in 2013. I talked about that this week. So to me, though the Bills, Josh Allen is on a mission, and he just seems to want to right the wrongs of last year, and even sometimes his own play. Now, the elbow injury, and I talked to Catherine Fitzgerald, who covers the Bills earlier this week, and Allen was limited for the first time earlier this week. So that is something to keep an eye on. And certainly losing Von Miller, I think, is an enormous loss, not just because everyone knows about Von as a pass rusher, and ultimately that's why he gets paid, and that's why he'll go into the hole. But Von sets the edge, and Von is an incredible run defender also. He can do it all. And I think losing Von has taken that. You've been able to run over them in ways that you couldn't previously. I just don't think the Bears have what the Dolphins had, but I do think that the Bills, come the playoffs, that would be a concern, both their ability to run the ball and their ability to defend the run. I think they will have enough. I'm going to say that the Bills get the victory, but I think this will probably be maybe closer than some people expect, and I think lower scoring than maybe people expect. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a sort of a kind of a 14-11 type game.
Well, count me most people then, because I don't think it's going to be close, and I don't think the Bears are going to win either. Is the stupefy spell been applied to Brian O'Leary? The Bills are on a 5-game winning streak. The Bears do not have a win in their last 7 games. And I say that some of that is relevant, because the Bills are what we call a good team. The Bears are what we call a bad team. And yes, they have shown green shoots. It has been fantastic to see them use Justin Fields correctly. I actually agree with some of their moves in the trades they've done that they were criticized for in terms of trying to build it up, but it's building it up for the future. And of course, the new team there needs a bit more time to be able to build that up. They need to build up at the lines more significantly. And Colin, your points about Von Miller are absolutely relevant. I mean, how he sets the edge is critical. And what he's performed on during the years, and is very relevant. But let's face it, the next layer of that Bills defense, and don't get me wrong, they want people to get healthy. They've been suffering with injuries on the defense all season long, and they've still been at a reasonably high level. So they can take it up another notch. Is Justin Fields a threat? Of course he is. Do I, however, expect the Bills to win this by more than one score? Absolutely. In relation to it. And we talked a little bit about teams with something on the line. As you'll see at the bottom of your screen, like the Bills will clinch the AFC East with a win and a Dolphins loss versus the Packers. Yeah, not so sure about the second part of that, but they do have clinching potential. And Brian, you rightly called out They want to keep winning to keep that advantage in that number one seed with that very precious single bye that exists over the Kansas City Chiefs, with the tiebreaker that they currently hold, of course. So count me in on the Bills. We have a 2-1 split. Brian, lone wolf in it for the Bears. Bears fans will, sing your praises. Heaven in the highest. We're coming into the Christmas season. Yeah, we should have done favorite Christmas songs as well, guys. So I want to hear some of them. If you can work in Last Christmas in any way, for example, or All I Want for Christmas Is You, you get 1,000 Irish NFL points. Challenge to people with their comments as well. Any comments with a decent Christmas song or pun will definitely guaranteed get read out. So, and we'll come to your comments in just a moment. We're going to cover one more game, and it's the second part of the Magician series, if you like. This one's the Seahawks at the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, the David Copperfield of the NFL, if you will. No one does it bigger or grander or more rambunctious than Patrick Mahomes. Left-handed, underhanded, no looking. There quite simply is no spectacle that he will not try to achieve and get over. Geno Smith, I mentioned earlier about potential comeback player of the year. Brian, you might touch on that in due course. But the Seahawks have been sliding. This would be an upset if they can pull it off. But I think it's fair to say, Colm, that the Chiefs, they've been stuttering of late. Although I did get, when I say the Seahawks might pull off an upset, I'm making it sound like it's a tight line. A friend of mine who's a Seahawks fan got the Seahawks plus 15.5 points earlier in the week. So basically, I don't know if the line's there at the moment, but that's what he got in the US. Basically, Colm, I know you love gambling so much. If the Seahawks lost by 15 points or less, he wins his bet. They would have to lose by 16 points or more for him to lose his bet. That seems like a very high line. But you can talk about your love of gambling if you like, Colm, or you can talk about the game. Your choice. I'll give you the option, mate. It's Christmas after all.
There, finally off mute. It wouldn't click in for me. This one is a very I suppose Andy Reid going up against Pete Carroll, two kind of legendary coaches, and I've already made my apologies to Pete about he got it right about Russ, etc., etc. Though I did see a video earlier today which summed up Pete Carroll. It was from, I don't know if anyone out there has seen it, but a video from 1992, way back when he was the defensive coordinator for the Jets. And in a game against the Dolphins kicker, Stoyankovich missed with 2 minutes to go. And Pete is loving it on the sideline, making the choke symbol and absolutely lapping it up. Unfortunately, there was still enough time left for the Dolphins to kick the winning field goal and win by 2 points. So Pete has always been Pete, and nothing will ever change. For the Chiefs, there are huge issues on the defense. I really, really think that they have to get things sorted out to go deep in the playoffs. But they have Andy Reid and they have Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes, despite, he has Kelsey, but his wide receivers, I mean, MVS, really, would you say he's Juju? They're not reliable, and yet Patrick Mahomes is the most passing yards in the entirety of the NFL. The biggest issue, I think, for the Chiefs are the defense and complacency, because they really have an awful tendency to switch off when things are they feel that it's too easy or they've underestimated an opponent. I think a couple of kind of near misses should wake them up, and they should win. But if they play it at all like they played against the Broncos or the Seahawks, Pete Carroll or the Texans, Pete Carroll and the Seahawks will be nowhere near as forgiving, and they will take advantage of it. And it could be where we finally see Kenneth Walker, who started off so brightly, had a mini slump. Maybe this is a game where he finds form, but I'm going to go with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes.
Colin rightly calls out the struggles of this Chiefs defense. We've seen it over the past few weeks in Denver, last week with the Texans. I think there's a big bonus for them is the fact that Tyler Lockett is out. He's had an operation on his wrist. He's ruled out. Not sure when he's coming back. That's a big loss because in a way then their wide receiver core becomes a little bit one-dimensional. Godwin, he's been around the league. He had a reasonably good start to the season. He's kind of tailed off a little bit. So they're very much relying on Metcalf. He's had 79 catches for 6 touchdowns this year. He's their marquee wide receiver. But in a position where he essentially is the main man now, and the Chiefs know they can, do they double team him? What's the alternative? They got 2 tight ends in Fant and Disley, who again have started the season well, but they've kind of regressed. Fant is still playing reasonably well. I struggle to see how this Chiefs team can put up. Bearing in mind how this defense for the Seahawks have been playing recently, where we saw it in the game in Carolina, we saw last weekend in the game against the 49ers on Thursday night, and how Brock Purdy went up and down the field at times on them. I can't see how they can continue, put up the points they know they need to beat the Chiefs. And one bright spot for the Chiefs over the past few weeks, despite the struggles, is the run game. The rookie running back really starting to settle down, having good games, and McKinnon, who's always there, doesn't get a lot of the coverage. He's had some really good, strong games of late. So I'm with Colin. The Chiefs win this game to go to 12 wins, which would be the fifth straight year. It's the third longest in the NFL history. It's significant. And Kelsey needs five catches to have 800 catches in his career. I imagine come the end of this game, he will have found those 5 catches, possibly even a couple of touchdowns. So I think the Chiefs will win this game. I think this is going to be one of the more comfortable wins that we've seen this weekend. Bearing in mind how the Chiefs have played recently, I think we'll rebound this weekend.
Yeah, their rookie Pacheco, which is just such a cool name, I think. I mean, it feels like he should be scoring the winning goal for Mexico or Argentina in a soccer game, but I can just see the call of him running in for a touchdown. And Pacheco, it's great. It's great.
Bottle of bubbly, no?
Bottle of bubbly? Really? Oh, yeah, okay, I'll go there. Or Cava, at least. Sparkling Cava, we'll give you that. But, yeah, I love. I don't think the line should be where my friend apparently got the odds on, but it is difficult to see. The Seahawks have definitely been struggling the last while. But Colin, you rightly called out the Chiefs' performance the last few weeks in some games they should win has not been great. I am backing them, however, to right the ship a little bit more. They've been too consistent and too good, not just in other seasons, but in this season, to let that linger and continue. And look, a home game against the 29th ranked defense in the league, 29th in scoring, 29th overall in yards allowed, for the number 1 ranked offense in yards scored, in passing offense, in points scored. Like, this should be the mismatch it is suggesting in relation to the performance. And do you know what? If this was the Seahawks of earlier in the season, I think I'd have a little bit more pause and a bit more caution in relation to it. And the Seahawks cornerbacks have played well, but the last few weeks there's been a bit of a decline. I'm backing the Chiefs more to right the ship, much more so than the Seahawks will right the ship. So I will go with the Chiefs. Jesus Christ. Nearly said Seahawks there at the end, just to confuse people. I will go with the Chiefs this weekend to continue their reign. And like you say, Brian, they're setting new records left, right, and center. The 7 division titles, nearly mirroring the Los Angeles Rams and only behind the New England Patriots for consecutive division titles. And this week, obviously, the 12 wins in a row going up. I think the Colts and the Pats are the 2 that are ahead of them. So that will be good.
And of course, Mark there with that comment, you were just referring to the fact that it is Jesus's birthday on Sunday, and that, listeners, is what Mark was referring to.
Okay. What did I?
He
I don't even know
he
what I
doesn't even
said
hear
now, Colin.
himself.
Okay, I'm going to listen back to this and then wonder and worry. But in the meantime, Brian, Colin in there with the Christmas reference. Any Christmas connotations coming in the comments?
I knew when you asked for this to be one man that would be immediately jumping in, and lo and behold, he hasn't let us down. Fred, driving home from Dallas. It'll be a long drive for Fred driving home from Dallas to get here. You might want to hop on a plane as well. One referring to comeback player of the year. Owen Horley called it out. Goff is potentially in the running for comeback player. You touched on McCaffrey. We might even have a brief conversation about the
I mentioned Goff earlier on as an option in that. I think it's going to be hard to look past Geno Smith because they tend to give it to people who are coming back more from serious injuries. But absolutely, I think he should be in the running.
We'll be interested to see if any more Christmas referrals come in. Fairy Tale in New York will be in there, bearing in mind the season in which the Giants are having it now. So I think that's the next game, Mark. I'll hand it off to you there.
Absolutely, Brian. The Christmas miracles, it's not the Christmas miracles, it's the yearly miracles have been going around in this regard. We haven't had to wait for Christmas because the Giants have come back to life, Brian. They have truly risen. I know that's an Easter reference, risen from the dead after 3 days. They've risen this year under the new leadership being driven by Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. And only recently the Vikings participated in the the largest miracle comeback of all time. The greatest, of course, was the Patriots in a certain Super Bowl from 28-3 down. Strangely, the same quarterback was involved on the other side of both of those occasions. But the Vikings truly rose in a Christmas miracle fashion, still maintain destiny at least of that second seed, which, okay, you don't get the bye, but you do control at least home field advantage if you win on Wild Card weekend for the divisional playoff round. So it is critical in terms of your positioning in that scenario. Brian, I'll start with you because I know you've probably analysed this game for about 29 hours each day for the last 3 days. But both teams really need to win this. Like, let's be clear, the Vikings need to win it, as I said, for the second seed. But the Giants need to win just to make sure and secure that postseason berth. As you rightly have up on the ticker here, they will get there and can get there this weekend if they win. And you get 2 losses from Lions, Commanders, and the Seahawks. And we're already all predicting the Seahawks will lose.
Yeah, and the Commanders go to San Fran, to Santa Clara to play the 49ers. So there is a real opportunity here for the Giants going into this game. Look, this Vikings team are having a fantastic season. Kevin O'Connell, Harry Styles, as Wink Martindale called him, bear in mind, Harry Styles, and he's 37 years of age. He's going up against a 59-year-old defensive coordinator who calls himself the blue-collar guy. So it'll be interesting to see how they compete against one another, bearing in mind Kevin O'Connell is a play caller. Well, his play calling last week in the first half was erratic, shall we say. They did 26 yards of offense. Colin Knightley called it on Monday. They couldn't get out of their way in the first half. The amount of, bad decisions between special teams and pick sixes, and then the second half, 460 yards of offense, and a crazy second half game in which they come back, and essentially the first half has been forgotten about, which is maybe lost in the craziness of what you've discussed there around the largest comeback in history. But you're right, they do have to win the game. I mean, Sunday night football's result in terms of the Giants winning was massive. The Giants defense really stepped up, as we touched on Monday, to see Kayvon Thibodeau essentially getting better and improving game by game. And we saw on Sunday what was really evident in Sunday's performance defensively was this is the second time this season that they've actually had a structure in terms of the 4 marquee players on the front 7 playing, and it was you could see immediately how effective and how it allowed Thibodeau to be in a position to go after the quarterback consistently throughout the game. And I think they can get a Cousins. I think there's opportunities there. When Cousins is under pressure, we see him make difficult decisions. He throws interceptions and needless passes. So I can see, again, a strategy how the Giants can remain in the game, which again is effective running from Saquon Barkley, allow Daniel Jones to be protected and have methodical drives, something similar to what we saw with a 97-yard drive, 8 minutes off the clock on Sunday night. But will it be enough? I don't think so. I think, bearing in mind the players in which the Vikings have, in particular Justin Jefferson and Thielen, and where the Giants secondary is at the moment, it wasn't really exposed on Sunday Night Football, but I believe over the course of 4 quarters, I think the Vikings will do enough. But the only thing with the Giants, if they can remain in the game with 6 or 7 minutes to go and they have an opportunity to win, who knows? Bearing in mind what the Vikings have done at home this season, and Michael Lombardi this week on his podcast was hilarious. He referred to Kevin O'Connell, if he ever makes a trip out to Vegas, they will immediately close the doors in every single casino because he's the luckiest head coach in the league at the moment because he just finds ways to win all these games at home. So maybe the luck will change on Sunday, but I just think the Vikings will have too much offensively to beat for the Giants, and the Giants will make the playoffs, but it won't be this weekend.
Yeah, he's definitely been playing the roulette table column with the Bills game as a prime example. Obviously, last week's game, even the game you were at Thanksgiving, the Patriots and the overturned Hunter Henry touchdown catch. Who knows? Is it going to be juggling the dice or dealing the cards for Kevin O'Connell again this weekend?
Yeah, I think is it the I can't remember if it was 2 or 6 plus 2 or 6 points in terms of differential that the Vikings are, and yet they sit at 11-3. Mark, I suppose in terms of you were looking for Christmas songs. Well, for the Giants, to me, Chuck Berry released "Run Rudolph Run" in 1958. It is, if the Giants are going to win this, it's going to be "Run Saquon Run." But the Beach Boys, just a few years later, released Little Saint Nick, and surely for the Vikings it will be Little Saint Kirk. And we also have the mini-me Kirk on the sidelines, if people have seen that. They appear to be making as much as they can. They are enjoying their 15 minutes of fame, but as long as the Vikings keep winning, I think that will continue there. The Vikings make no sense. They make no sense whatsoever. But sometimes that can just happen in a season. Leicester made no sense the year they won the title, but they went and did it. Greece made no sense when they won the Euros. Denmark made less sense again back in 92. And I just, they will allow yards. Yeah, they will allow points, but you always have to worry about Justin Jefferson. And you try and take him out of the game, but then Adam Thielen shows up. And then in Ham and in Dalvin Cook, they have ways to run the ball. So I think this will probably be a close game. But ultimately, I am going to say that Kevin O'Connell and Kirk Cousins moved to 12 wins on the year.
The Giants, are going to have to hope that Kayvon Thibodeau and that defensive line can get to Kirk Cousins and truly, in the words of the Spice Girls for their Christmas #1, have two become one. And meet him there in the backfield. I was trying to think of how to work in E17 Stay Another Day, classic early 90s stuff here, guys, we're going for. But the reality is, we're talking about teams coming across a little bit of a stutter in recent weeks. The Giants were, Brian, they were not falling apart, but they were coming down off the high of the performance. Saquon looked he was tired and run down. Daniel Jones wasn't making the clutch plays that he had been earlier in the season. And then last week, the bounce back win against the Commanders. And I know you called it, including the little jibes when we made our picks on WhatsApp. And you kind of called out, said, geez, that's a funny way to spell Giants when I had selected the Commanders, which I did appreciate. But you start to wonder, is is that their recovery? I mean, Colin, I said it earlier in the season. I say it every season. I'm going to keep saying it. Please, people, for the love of God, never, ever bet on two teams in the NFL. The Cowboys are one. The Minnesota Vikings are the other. They defy logic this year in some of the games they've won. In the games they've lost, they've been absolutely annihilated pretty much. So they've never necessarily been in doubt. And it would not surprise me if the Giants overturn them. But with the way it's going, with the roll of the dice, with the extra card They pull out. Kirk Cousins reminds me a little bit of his famous "Do you like that? Do you like that?" I mean, he's clearly the Paul Daniels. You're going to like this, not a lot, but you'll like it. Kind of approach. A little bit cheesy, a little bit passe, but he still manages for the most part to get the job done in a very average way. He's going to get the job done this weekend. They're going to move to 12 wins. We're still going to wonder how the hell they're on 12 wins. I agree with Michael Lombardi that Kevin O'Connell has rabbit's feet decorated around with the 4-leaf clovers and everything. He is running a lucky run, but you sometimes need luck as well. So, Brian, I'm afraid we're going with the Giants here, going with the Vikings here as well to take this game. Do you have anything else on it, Brian? I know as I said, you've got all the angles on it.
Yeah, now one interesting quote, and again, I don't know if Kevin O'Connell is just trying to play tricks with the media and potentially the Giants staff, but he said a number of times this week he's considering taking down the snap count for a number of players because he's obviously conscious that they're going to be in the playoffs and obviously there's bigger games to come. So one player in particular who had a really good game last week, Osborne, the wide receiver, he's starting to kind of get more traction, more reps, and maybe he's the player that is one to consider for Sunday as opposed to the big guys such as Thielen and Jefferson doing all the magic. We saw him score a touchdown early on, which led to the comeback last week. It'd be interesting to see if he follows through on that. I think it's too early in the process to be considering reducing workloads for players. Bearing in mind, if they don't get that number 2 seed, inevitably they'll probably end up in San Fran or Santa Clara, because they would leapfrog them into second, and you don't want to go on the road. As you said, it's really crucial they get the wild card game and the divisional game at home. You're saying about East 17 stay another day. Well, maybe I think it's wait another day for the Giants because it might be a week down the road before they secure that playoff spot when they play the Colts at home, more so than this weekend. But I imagine it'll be a really close game.
Nicely done, Brian. We'll save the Parker white winter coats for another week then as well. And actually, Osborne coming on would be great to give him 4, more meaningful threats. Obviously, Jefferson is key, Thielen, Hawkinson, who they traded for, and Osborne, because an underrated story this season is Dalvin Cook is not producing the way he was in terms of yards after contact. Like all the more advanced run metrics, Dalvin Cook is not producing in the run game as he was. I see Colum's eyes light up at that one. We will debate the pros, cons, whys, and maybes of Dalvin Cook another day, potentially after he goes off for 200 yards against the Giants defense and makes me look really stupid. But we need to get through a few of these games, so let's do a bit more of a quick fire. One person analyze the games, the other two just give a quick one-word answer. One word, Brian, one word. First of all, Saints at the Browns. Colum, over to you, sir.
Yeah, a game that's going to take another one of those cold weather games. And probably if it was the other way around, I might feel a little bit differently. But ultimately, Mark, we hear of the little drummer boy a lot at this time of year. It will be the little runner boy because Nick Chubb is going to play. The foot injury is not going to prevent him from playing, and he will be the difference between these two teams. I have the Browns winning it, and the Saints will have some decisions to make in the offseason as to what they do at QB and at head coach.
We call them Browns.
Saints. Okay. Moving on. Brian, the Texans at the Titans.
Yeah, Malik Willis is going to start. Obviously, you touched on earlier, Tannehill, is the pocket passer. He's injured. We saw the injury last weekend in LA against the Chargers, and he's not going to play. Malik Willis' actually first game was against the Texans, where he did very little because he didn't have to, because Derrick Henry ran for 229 yards in that game and 2 touchdowns. He's ran for 200 yards and plus 200 yards 5 games in a row against the Texans. And once the Texans have been playing really well of late, the Titans have to get this game. I mean, the fact that they've lost 4 in a row, they're still hanging on to the division lead. Even if they lose this game and they lose next week, as long as they beat the Jags in week 17, they win the division. So, but again, they'll try and win this, put the pressure on the Jags, who obviously will know by tomorrow morning what the result is of their game. They played each other. It wasn't even close. The score doesn't reflect the game recently. 17-10. There was a garbage time touchdown. Texans are missing players. There's a lot of players there, and the most significant player now for me is Damian Pierce. He's been ruled out with a foot injury. He's the guy everything goes through in that offense, and I see a difficult day for the Texans on the road. Titans to bounce back after 4 losses.
Titans
with some reservations, but Titans. Okay. I've been given the joy, the distinct pleasure and honor of talking about the Broncos at the Rams on Christmas Day. In thinking about Christmas songs, I could reference Gary Jules being at number 1 with Mad World. But I'll go back even older than that. And number 1, way back in the early 80s, was the Human League with Don't You Want Me Baby. And the resounding answer of most NFL fans to this Christmas Day matchup is no, we really, really don't. One of the most primetime games. The only thing I can say is for a European audience, they've been very kind to us because you have no fear that in having too much Christmas dinner, getting a bit comfortable in the chair and falling asleep and missing this game, which is going to kick off at 9:30 our time, followed by the 4-win Cardinals at the Bucs, shall I say, for the really late game, you're not going to miss too much. Like, I can promise you that. In the Broncos or the Rams, you're not going to miss too much. Russell Wilson will come back having rested, even though he cleared concussion protocol last week. The Rams obviously have come out with some surprising results in the last while and performed a little bit better than people might have expected, albeit that they have so much of their stars on IR that it's very much a lost season for them, something that they were obviously hoping. The Super Bowl defending champions are coming with the worst season ever of a Super Bowl defending champion of all time. Again, start of the season, you can understand the NFL and the schedulers kind of going, Christmas Day, captive audience, let's get the best primetime game, Super Bowl winners, Russell Wilson going into Denver, box office, primetime, bish, bash, bosh, everyone's going to love it. Yeah, maybe less so now. I would like to say, who cares as my answer to who's going to win this game, but I'm not going to be that mean. I am going to say that the Broncos are going to win this game. Their defense is still so, so good. And Russell Wilson, with the bit of rest, hopefully his injuries have improved and gets into a bit more rhythm. So I'll go with the Broncos to win. Broncos for Colin. Brian?
Broncos.
Okay, well, gentlemen, we will keep this train going. I feel like this should be a quick fire game as well, but I don't want to do a disservice to the Cincinnati Bengals.
You have there's the Bucs game as well.
Bugger! Yes, there is. Sorry, Colin. Thank you. We have to talk about that one as well. This is the second half of the sleeping Christmas Day you won't miss much of. The Bucs at the Cards.
I think we can. For me, the Cards are the Rams are in a bad situation and they have a lot to figure out. The Cards are in a worse situation. They're lying about their GM, their head coach, and the defensive coordinator come out and are like taken by surprise in interviews. Wish him well in his future endeavors. Hang on, guys! I thought he was sick. Don't know what's going on in the Cards. They're down to their third string QB. It really couldn't get much worse. They absolutely need to clean house, and the sooner they do it, the better. Whoever they are playing should beat them. Tom Brady gets lucky once again, truly born under a lucky star like somebody else, So to me, it is indeed the Bucs.
You're talking about Cards, well, and Colin summed up this Cards team well. Well, there's a joker in the pack, and he's the owner because he signed off on that contract for Kyler Murray last summer, and that's going to be, unfortunately, for the next head coach, because I don't believe Kingsbury will be there next season. It's a difficult one, whether they really want to work with that guy. Yeah, Colin's right. The Bucs are not playing well, but they're fortunate they're landing into this game. No adverse weather conditions. Arizona, late game, Brady. Bucs win. Hang on to that division lead.
It's down in Arizona, so University of Phoenix Stadium. He's played a few games there before. One turned out pretty good. One turned out not so good, as Brian well remembers. McSorley is the starting quarterback. Unfortunately for McSorley, I feel he's going to be playing McPauley and I do not rate his ability and the Cards' ability to play. It even feels like in recent weeks, I mean, a lot of their players are not loving the regime there generally, and I fully concur. Cliff Kingsbury will not be there next season. And of course, he could be McSorley as well if he gets sacked by Devin White, Levante David, etc., on that Bucks defense, who, in fairness, have been keeping the Bucks in games, even though they've been playing an exceptional amount of minutes and time of possession. Yes, Colin, Tom Brady is lucky. He's lucky with the run-in he's got this season, and the Bucks, I still say, will win and continue to limp to that NFC South title. Now, I was getting ahead of myself, and you're right to pull me back into that game. Thank you, sir. But I'm getting ahead of myself because I was moving on to a game I wanted to almost skip by personally. If we can avoid any mention to Las Vegas, the Raiders, laterals, throwing the ball generally, I'd really appreciate it because it's still a sensitive matter. But I do want to do fair justice to the Cincinnati Bengals, who, coming off a Super Bowl losing season and a poor start to the year, have definitely bounced back with a vengeance. The offensive line is clicking. Joe Burrow is clicking. Jamar Chase is back healthy. And they will go to visit the upset, shall we say, rather sore New England Patriots, who are scrambling really to try and stay in the wild card spot, and not a great place for them to come out against this hungry Bengals side. I'm not in the Christmas cheer to give too many Christmas references to this. Brian, I'll start with you, mate, maybe to throw a bit of light on this, illuminate this game.
This Patriots team we don't know what we're getting. They're so inconsistent. We spoke on Monday's show about what's been masked, and that crazy ending is how up and down the offense was. You know, they did very little in the first half, came out in the second half. I was looking at bits and pieces of the stats for the season. Like, they've been in the red zone 37 times, and they've only scored touchdowns of 14 drives. So they're struggling in the red zone. We've seen even in the Jets game, they were methodical, they were moving the ball really well, get into critical situations, can't get into the end zone. And it's left them in a difficult situation. And we've seen Mac Jones get a bit frustrated on the sideline. Their secondary, from a defense perspective, their secondary has been really good, really strong secondary. Only allowed 202 yards. They're holding teams down in terms of not giving away too many touchdowns. But you're going up against this team in the Bengals who won 6 in a row. Joe Burrow is on fire. He's probably playing better than he was at this stage last season. And the Patriots lost 3 of the last 4. The momentum's with the Bengals. This game really kind of reminds me of last week's game. Even the line is reflective. It's 3.5 point handicap for the Bengals. It was 3.5 points last week. And I just don't see how the Patriots, bearing in mind the difficulty which they've had on offense, can live with a Bengals team that I can only see putting up huge points in this game in terms of the numbers for offense. And, you know, I see them getting into the 30s on this Patriots defense as well as the Patriots defense has played. And I just don't see how the Patriots can live and go toe-to-toe with a Bengals team that are only going in one direction. And that's about it. I think the Pats have beaten them the last 4 times in Gillette. They're actually 4-0 against the Bengals in Gillette. I think that streak is finally going to come to an end on Sunday. I think the Bengals win and put themselves in a position to be in the playoffs, depending on tonight's result with the Jets.
All right, Colin, Brian's being the Grinch. Come on, give me some Christmas good hope and cheer, please.
There'll be plenty of Christmas cheer for the Bengals. They will be walking in winter Burrow land because Joe Burrow is exceptional. He is a gifted quarterback playing at the peak of his powers, and they have an angry defender because if Amon St. Brown was snubbed, DJ Reader, my goodness, how did DJ Reader not get a Pro Bowl? Not he's unbelievable. His run stopping ability. He is a one-man machine, and to me, for those reasons, the fact that they are playing at such a high level now of Bill Belichick, I'm sure will look to slow that down. But they've just so many options, and Burrow is just so good. And I think despite the fact that they are two of them at it, it's going to be a lonely Christmas in the OC room in New England.
An underrated thing, I meant to call it out last Monday when we were talking about the game, actually, was that Marcus Jones, that dynamic returner and wide receiver, for the one snap he's had a few snaps, but the one touchdown he did against the Bills, got a bit exposed in his so-called primary role at cornerback. Jack Jones was out of the game. He was actually in coverage on the 4th and 10 play, another play, and then obviously mossed by Keenan Cole on the touchdown that shouldn't have stood because he had stepped out of bounds. So that Patriots defense, which if they keep a team under 17 points, if they've kept a team under 18 points, they've won every game 7-0. Once they go over 18 points, they're 0-7. Pretty easy stat to follow there. Trying to keep this Bengals side to under 17 points would be a stretch. And the only Christmas reference I can come up to is that number one, a few years ago, if you remember, in a real contra attempt against the X Factor, was Rage Against the Machines, Killing in the Name of. Whilst not literally, certainly axing in the name of Matt Patricia has been top of mind for a number of pundits during the year and for many Patriots fans in the last while. We will wait to see changes at the end of the year, but this game, for me, unfortunately, at least is going to be a very comfortable Bengals win. And so we have a clean sweep, so I can only hope for the power of our reverse curse somehow benefiting my Patriots team. But Bengals all the way on this, stay ahead of the Ravens in that AFC North run to the divisional title as well, which is critical for them. Now we're going to go to one more game reasonably quickly before we come back to your comments, and thank you everyone for continuing to engage, throwing your comments, throwing your Christmas songs, bit of crack with us. It always makes it more enjoyable. Come to probably, I would say, the next two games are the most interesting and fascinating games of the entire weekend. We will start, and we'll then cover some comments for the Commanders at the Niners. Both of these teams have something to play for. The Niners, we alluded to it earlier, and the Vikings are really striving for that, having already secured their division, are striving for that number 2 seed. And the Commanders currently occupy that 7th seed, that loss against the Giants last week, knocking them down the pegging. But they need to keep in the hunt. They need to keep passionately away on this because the Seahawks are sniffing around. The Lions are sniffing around. They are going over to Santa Clara, to Levi Stadium, to face the irascible Brock Purdy. I mean, we had Band-Aid. Do they know it's Christmas? Does Brock Purdy know he's a rookie? He had another impressive game in winning against Seattle. No mistakes, consistent, does what he needs to in that offense. It's almost like Jimmy G wasn't necessarily needed, Colin, and I know you've made that point once or twice before. How do you see this one going with the Commanders going to visit the Niners?
Well, I mean, I think that this 49ers defense are the bullies of the league. They basically show up and they take your lunch money, and then they just beat you to a bloody pulp, even though you've handed over the goods. They are fantastic, and they make it easy. I mean, talked about it, Mark, on Monday's show a little bit, that the 49ers have done, I think, what the Colts were trying to do. They have created a system where it really doesn't matter who's at QB, right? They have a system there. They have so many weapons. They can just, and they have Kyle Shanahan, just a phenomenal mind. And let's not forget that this is a guy who has lost his assistants over the past few years because they have been so good and they've gone on elsewhere to do quite well. I think ultimately for the Commanders, you saw the limits against the Giants, and yeah, they're going to point to some refereeing decisions, but ultimately they couldn't get it done. And I think that this 49ers defense is better than the Giants defense. You heard during the week, the Commanders put out a great video around the Pro Bowl stuff, but there was kind of that maybe got attention off of the fact that Ron Rivera got asked about making a change at QB. And he said, not at the moment. which wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement. And there's a reason, that obviously they went out and made a move in the summer that may have been the owner. And look, I think the offseason we're going to have to address that again, because that needs to change. But for me, the 49ers continue to dominate on the defensive side of things, and they get the victory.
I took time out to watch our interview with Ron Rivera last February, when we were fortunate to have his time when we were in LA for the Super Bowl. And he was very non-committal in that one last February to Taylor Heinicke. And what we're seeing from Taylor Heinicke now is essentially what we saw last year. A guy that will come in, help the team, have players play for him, which is very evident compared to what he had with Carson Wentz. But yeah, he's not going to be the guy to bring them forward. And I think it's another interesting offseason ahead. Another interesting offseason ahead for the 49ers, because if Brock Purdy continues to play at the level he's been playing in the 3 games so far, he's thrown for 2 touchdowns. His numbers are very good. He looks very composed. Even when he's been put off by difficult hits, he seems to step up. Last week's game, he was supposedly injured going into it. Didn't look the case. What happens come the end of the season if he goes on a real strong late playoff push and potentially gets them over the line and into the Super Bowl, albeit we all recognise it'll probably be ultimately the 49ers defence, which wins them the game. He's still going to be the man leading them as quarterback. Anyway, that's for another day, but it's going to be a very interesting offseason. I look forward to those type of conversations. For this game, the 49ers are coming off 10 days rest. They haven't played on the Thursday. This defence is firing on all cylinders. They've won 7 games in a row. You've got a team coming off a Sunday night game going West Coast. The upheaval of that. The only thing I could say is if they can stop McCaffrey, and put Brock Purdy in a position where he has to throw, because they are top 10 in terms of run defense. But I just don't see how the the Commanders offense can do enough, like Colm said, going against this 49ers defense. It reminds me of a guy, Colm's talking about having lunch money removed. I remember going to school in town and a guy walked up to me and said, what size shoe you're wearing? And I said, an 8. And he goes, God, if it had been a 7, I would have taken them off your feet. This is the kind of thing we're dealing with here. They go in, beat them up, as Colm said, beat them up again, and then take the mick out of them. So for me, it's a very comprehensive win for the 49ers.
I don't quite know what to do with that story, Brian. So I'm just gonna let it sit there in relation to it. And look, I'm with you. I will say that my pre-season Super Bowl pick of the 49ers is still there or thereabouts. They're obviously, we know they're going to be in the playoffs, so they're going to have a ticket at the lottery, and we'll see how it all pans out. But they're playing quite consistently and conservatively. They're going to be conservative with Brock Purdy at quarterback, but at the same token, they have the playmakers. Kittle has been showing up. Christian McCaffrey, talking about Pro Bowl snubs, you could argue that he deserved the spot over Miles Sanders. Sanders maybe had a better season on the ground in places, and the Philadelphia obviously are leading the NFL, but what McCaffrey gives you in the passing game cannot be understated. Overall, yeah, it's a bit more about the 49ers. I'm going to focus rather than the Commanders, because let's face it, that defense for the 49ers has given up a maximum of 17 points in that 7-game win streak. That was even against the Dolphins. Do I think this Commanders offense is as dynamic, exciting, capable of dominating a defense like this to the same level? No. Do I therefore still have great belief in, with that suffocating defense and enough playmakers on the offense, the 49ers will go to an 8-game winning streak? The answer to that is yes. Yes, I do. So the 49ers to keep that momentum up. The Commanders will still be there or thereabouts, but Seattle and Detroit fans will rejoice. Giants fans will try to get some more breathing room, and the wild card drama will continue anew after all the Christmas presents have been divvied up. Speaking of Christmas presents, Brian, has anyone any lovely comments or Christmas gifts worth sharing and discussing? OBJ in a manger, no crib for a bed. The little Lord Jerry signed him instead. Fred, we thank you for that. Although Lord Jerry was referring to the fact that it was unlikely during the week in a press interview that he would be signing OBJ at this stage. So we will see.
He's changing his mind by the week.
By the hour?
Well, last week he said he was signing them, and then during the week he said he wasn't signing them. So I don't know. He's just playing silly buggers at this stage. That's about the extent of it. No, here's one from Keith. To a baby slip a screen. Yeah. Very
So
good from
Santa Baby, to a baby slip a screen to J.R. Tariq for me. Very, very inventive, guys. We're loving it. Loving the Christmas themed tunes being presented. Anything on the football, Brian? Or is everyone just enjoying the Christmas tunes?
Everybody's just enjoying the Christmas tonight. It's very
that's
good.
what it's all about.
You set the standard, Mark. You asked for the songs that they're given to you. You cannot.
I did. They're giving us what we want. So, like, I mean, hey, it's all about the Christmas spirit and enjoyment. Look, that does bring us, and we're gonna. 3 games to go, guys, and we'll wrap up the other 2 in a moment. But I think we do need to spend some proper time on, to me, what is the game of the week. The Eagles at the Cowboys. If the Cowboys have any designs, of course, on the division title, this is an absolute must-win game. But the Eagles obviously have a great clinching scenario in this regard because they can, of course, clinch not just their division, but indeed the number 1 seed as well from the NFC. However, they are not starting with Jalen Hurts. They are going to be starting with a different sheriff in town altogether. The moustache, the magic. We started with magic. It's Minshew magic, Colin. Gardner Minshew is going to start at quarterback for the Eagles. Can you feel the excitement? Can you feel the love tonight, as Elton John and Tim Rice would want you to sing? Obviously, it loses a little bit of its sparkle and its sprinkle of magic dust because of the change at quarterback. But this is still going to be a monumental matchup between these 2 teams.
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, Fred is expecting the Cowboys to win by 10. I've seen a lot of the consensus seems to be around the Cowboys, and yeah, okay, they're missing Jalen Hurts, and I'm a big Jalen Hurts fan. I've been a fan for a while, but to me, the Eagles still have 7 Pro Bowlers going out there against them, and Gardner Minshew is a decent backup. Like up until Trevor Lawrence took the step that he needed to, when you compare their stats, like he's not a franchise guy, but he's the absolutely top tier of the backups. And I think what I haven't seen spoken about enough is Gardner's college coach was Mike Leach, and obviously another sad passing, a man, who went very suddenly. I think you saw Gardner gave a eulogy at his funeral, as remembrance earlier in the week. I think that could be huge for Gardner. Is a little bit in some ways like Baker Mayfield, guys who play better when there's something on the line, where there's a chip on the shoulder, or where there's a point to prove. And to me, like, there's not going to be any fear for Gardner Minshew going up with, even going in against the Cowboys. He has done it, and he will want a point to prove. Now, for the Cowboys, we talked about it last week. I would say Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn, when Micah Parsons made the stupid comments on the Von Miller podcast, and then came out afterwards and said, "Oh, I said lots of other things." Like, yeah, but you still gave the Eagles all sorts of ammunition, and then you went and you lost to the Jags, and deservedly lost to the Jags. The Cowboys are obviously going to be more motivated because they need it more. Although I do agree with Fred that even if they get the win, I think that the number 1 seed is gone. But I just think that this Eagles team are going to be, because of Parsons' comments, because Gardner has his college coach that he'll want to prove a point for. I'm going to say that I disagree with Fred, and I disagree with a lot of the other pundits, and I think that the Eagles can go into Jerry's world and they can get a victory.
Brian, you love these 2 teams. Just tell us how much you love each of them and how excited you are to see these 2 teams continue in their winning ways.
Last week's defeat for the Cowboys was monumental. And the reason being, Hurts is a sprained shoulder. Okay, if the Cowboys had have held on to that win last week, 17 points up, they would be playing one game out of the division lead, and with an opportunity to win this game, and not only win the game, be the number 1 seed, because they have the tiebreaker over the Vikings at 2. So it's an absolute disaster from the fact they lost this game, because he would have had Hurts having to play now this week with the injury. Who knows if he would have been right, and you would see a scenario where the Cowboys would go and win the game, and after such a big season for the Eagles, then to not be the number 1 seed and not win the division would be an absolute disaster. I agree with Colin. Like, as much as the Gardner Minshew storyline this week, as you see in the bookmaker, for example, it was minus 1 point with the Cowboys. As soon as Minshew was confirmed as a starter, it went down to -6. But they're still playing all their starters elsewhere. Like, they still got one of the best offensive lines in the league. And people are saying, well, they'll rely on the run game. They'll get Sanders and they get Scott involved. I think they'll come out throwing. I think they'll go after this Cowboys secondary. Since Anthony Brown went out for the season, since Jordan Lewis went out injured for large parts of the season, and Diggs is great with the interceptions, but, on the back end, he can be exposed. You saw last week, Trevor Lawrence, 503 yards. I know Minshew's not that level, but he's capable to go out with an offensive line that keeps him upright to go and put big numbers up on this Cowboys defense. And offensively, Dak, this is a big game for Dak. They're in the playoffs. We know who the likelihood they're going to play in terms of the NFC South. But he has to come out and play a really secure game. Like last weekend, some of his interceptions were really poor, and we saw it against Texans as well. We prior to that, they need a big game from him. I'm not bought in on this Cowboys team winning this game easily. I'm going to pick the Eagles as well. I think the Eagles will do enough to win the game and secure number 1 seed. And people are saying Jalen Hurts won't play for the remainder of the season. That would be a concern for me. You go 5 weeks before he steps on the field again in a playoff game. And there's a real piece around why the Eagles want to win next week as well, because they're playing the Saints. And if they beat the Saints next week, they only better their draft position because they have the Saints number 1 pick come April as well.
The wheels within wheels of the story, Brian. The wheels within wheels. Yeah, like this. The Eagles team has not just been Jalen Hurts. I mean, does losing him matter? Of course it does. He's been such a threat, both with his feet as well as some beautiful balls. Even just the timing the number 1 starter has with the starting offense is not easily replicated. But Gardner Minshew is one of those characters of the NFL. I mean, the argument that his mustache got its own media deal has been proved wrong. But if he suddenly, ran out of this game and started singing karaoke, "All I Want for Christmas Is You," so I had to get Mariah in there somewhere, it wouldn't surprise us. He's a bit of a character, and he is not going to be overawed by the scenario. I hadn't realized his college coach was Mike Leach, so great call out on that column, because I think that, that can play into the effect here. But yes, we have an Eagles team that's coming off an amazing recognition during the Pro Bowl, a defense that will be loving the idea of them being written off and the whole team being written off in different fashion. I mean, it very much was Micah Parsons kind of channeling Siegfried and Roy, wasn't it, in terms of putting his head in the lion's mouth. At some point, the lion actually does bite you or claw you. And it does have a bit of that feel that, yes, they got clawed last week at Jacksonville, but maybe that pain is not yet over. I don't know. I'm hoping, and I don't think really, that this is just a reaction to last week. I think we all have a little bit of doubt over the Cowboys, a little bit like the doubts we were expressing around the Vikings earlier. And I thought I was going to be a lone wolf, but remarkably, we are going to have a clean sweep of us all going for Gardner Minshew to lead the Eagles over the Cowboys in Jerry World. I cannot wait to see what Fred, our resident Dallas Cowboys fan, is going to post up in a comment. Fred, just try to keep it reasonably clean. Reasonably clean is all we ask. But yes, the Eagles, they've been that good. So I will go with the Eagles as well. Gents, 2 quick games to wrap up really quickly. Raiders at the Steelers. We started the show talking about the sad passing of Franco Harris. I mentioned, obviously, the Immaculate Reception. These are the 2 teams that were playing in that particular game. This is the late game, Sunday Night Football, primetime in the US. Both of them have extraordinarily slim chances. In fact, maybe, Brian, one of the most interesting angles is still Mike Tomlin's unbeaten, if you like, winning record, or at least being plus above 500, which is still alive. Give us the skinny, give us your pick.
You're right about the Franco Harris piece, obviously, because it's going to be a very emotional game for Steelers fans, and it's even more emotional because they actually were planning to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception, and there's a ceremony planned. I'm not sure if it was pre-game or a half-time, but this has been in the offing for quite some time, so it's quite even more sad and upsetting that the fact that it's the week in which he passes away is the time in which they're going to celebrate it. From a game perspective, I was surprised by Mike Tomlin's comments this week. He's been very supportive of Kenny Pickett, but I wouldn't say he was critical of him this week, but he was very harsh in his statements of saying he's a long way to go. He's obviously going to be back in this game. For the Raiders, they're suggesting it's going to be the coldest game in Steelers history. So, what will the Raiders do, and how will they manage that type of atmosphere that's going to be around the game, and obviously the weather conditions. So I think to me, it's going to come down with who can run the ball more efficiently. And right now, for me, that's the Raiders, despite all the frailties they've had up and down season. Josh Jacob, for me, will be the guy that goes up and down the field on the Steelers, who's, with the exceptions last week, their run defense has been quite poor in the second half of the season. And I don't think Pickett will have enough to get the game done if the Raiders find a way to withstand the rushing from Harris. So for me, it's a Raiders victory.
Okay. And Colin, I said Sunday Night Football. Of course, it's on our Sunday early morning. It's actually Saturday Night Football. It's Christmas Eve late game, isn't it? So sorry about that, people. Seriously, this time of year, don't trust me on dates for anything. I have no idea what day it is. I have no idea what's happening. Colin, who have you got?
In this particular game, it's a kind of a coin toss one in many ways, and the Steelers have kind of taken over the Raiders have kind of taken over from the Seahawks as that team that never plays a normal game. That meme and that was said about the Seahawks for years, and that was the case with the Seahawks. But this year, it is absolutely the Raiders. So I could see the Raiders going in and winning. I could equally see the Raiders going in and laying a complete egg after last week. I'll go with Magic Mike because I want to see him keep the streak going. So for that reason, I'll go with it. But it is not said with a great deal of confidence.
I'm going to keep it reasonably simple. I think the Raiders have the better players. I think they've got the better running game. I think they've got the better passing game. I think they've got the better quarterback. I think they've got maybe not the better defense. Steelers have the better defense. However, the Steelers are going to ride the emotion of the Franco Harris passing. They're going to use that as fuel locally. And secondly, just on a point of principle, I am not picking the Raiders for the rest of the season after last week. I'm just not picking them. I don't care who they're playing. They could be playing the Texans with one hand tied behind their back with, I don't know, Nathan Peterman at quarterback. And I will still just pick against them on a point of justice and principle. Speaking of picks, before we get to the Green Bay and Dolphins game, Brian, how are we looking on the season so far in terms of our picks?
Well, this is last weekend's picks, Mark. You were ahead quite comfortably on myself and Colin, but you only got 9 last weekend. Myself and Colin got 11 out of 15, so we're slowly catching up. But there's going to be a big shift this weekend, judging by some of the picks this evening. But last weekend, where I suppose just looking there, you went with the Ravens, me and Colin picked the Browns. I went with the Giants. You all picked the Commanders. Big shock with the Cowboys. We all went Cowboys. We all went Chiefs. That was obviously a tighter game than we expected. I went with the Raiders, Mark, and they won in that crazy game.
I noticed that, Brian. You didn't have to talk about that again. You didn't have to bring it up.
And Colin got a good one there. He went Saints over the Falcons. We both went with the Falcons. But look,
tight at the top with a couple of weeks to go. Tight at the top. That's what we'll say. All right. Speaking of the final game to wrap us all up, then the Packers and the Dolphins. Colin, do you want to take us through this and see where we go to in terms of wrapping up all 16 games tonight as well? Fun and games.
Well, for the Packers, the week has once again been dominated by Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers talking about off-field stuff. Um, Kaylin Kaler, who we have had on the show, did a really interesting piece where she spoke to a number of former and current Packers players about learning Aaron Rodgers' hand signals. And it was a piece where she kind of gave insights into it, how it works, why Rodgers does it, how often they change it, so that even if a player leaves and goes to another roster, they're not able to pick up on it. It didn't ever seem like that the piece was designed to be particularly critical. It was to offer an insight. Like when she was on with us, she talked about how she's really interested in QB play, really interested in QB personalities, and that's what the piece felt like. Then Aaron went on the Pat McAfee show, as he does every Tuesday, and they decided to mock the piece, to dismiss the piece, to belittle the piece. McAfee said it was anonymous sources. It wasn't at all anonymous sources. It was entirely sourced. The names were there. He then came out on Wednesday and admitted that it was sourced, but he mocked it again. And obviously there's been this kind of weird pile-on as a result. I don't understand it. Like, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't like the criticism, fine, but take issue with your receivers, the current and former guys who are quoted. Like, why are you having a go that it's a nothing story? If you're interested in football and you're interested in QB play, and you can take issue, and we can criticize, and we have done, Aaron Rodgers as sometimes his play, sometimes his leadership. But you can recognize he's an incredibly talented QB, and you want to get those insights. I mean, similar pieces have been written about Peyton Manning and Peyton Manning's approach to games and his study and what he would do, and equally about Tom Brady. So this isn't revolutionary that a journalist would want to write a piece about a quarterback's play. I don't understand it. I don't understand why Rodgers wants to be the center of attention, but again, if it is anything other than utter adulation and genuflecting at the altar of Aaron Rodgers, he loses his mind. Aaron, you are a very talented quarterback, very talented, but get offline. If you cannot deal with the criticism, the internet is the worst place in the world to be. That said, this game, they will make it difficult for the Dolphins, but the Dolphins, coming off the back of 3 road losses, absolutely have to get a win. And I'm going to say that they will have enough to do that. But the weather is meant to be a lot more like Green Bay than traditional Miami. So that is something to keep an eye on, certainly.
I said on Monday's show that there's a number of Packers fans, excuse me, that still believe they're going to make the playoffs. But right now the percentage number is 4.999%. They need a lot to go their way. And I think this weekend, in particular Christmas Day, is where it all ends, and they can put that kind of narrative to bed. I think the Dolphins will win this game comfortably.
I'm just loving the idea and the sight of Colm going on a great little rant with the moose ears. It really made it, Colm. I'll just say I was trying to take it seriously, and then the ears were going. It was great. In terms of this game, yeah, I'm with Brian. The Packers have been too inconsistent. They haven't performed on offense sufficiently. They haven't performed on defense sufficiently either. That's an underrated aspect of their poor season this year. And I have the Dolphins continuing to try to keep that AFC East competitive with the Bills, further securing their own position. And Colm, you rightly called out 3 road losses in a row. They've got to prove they can win on the road, because it looks very likely they'll be on the road in the playoffs, and that will be key in relation to it. Brian, one quick point final from you before we wrap up.
I had to double check the screen there, because it's normally you, Mark, that's on the Aaron Rodgers rant over the course of the last 3 years in which we've been doing the show. So maybe it was nice to have a change and hear Colm vent his anger at the frustrations of Aaron Rodgers and how he goes on. But I do agree with everything in which Colm has said. So no need for you to have a rant for the remainder of the season when it comes to Aaron Rodgers.
That's fine. I'll just rant about the Raiders instead for a change. For the observant among you, we actually only covered 15 games. The Chargers, the Colts, Monday Night Football. We haven't got to. We will look to put out some material in relation to that come the end of the season. The Colts, should we say, don't want to be winning apparently at any point in the game other than the very end, because who knows what the comeback will be. The Chargers on a great roll, so
and
we'll see.
the Colts are now on their third QB of the year, probably because they want to get off the hook on paying Matt Ryan. But my goodness, some of the ways that teams are run around the league. The NFL came out that about like how much was being spent in terms of replacing head coaches. Yeah, well, like the league needs to look at itself. I'll have another pop at him, Brian. The owner of the Giants had a go about players and about taunting. The owners need to take a real look at themselves and some of the decisions that they are making. Utterly embarrassing, and they're getting involved in football decisions when they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Have a Merry Christmas, Colin.
The Colts and the Panthers, both on the second head coaches of the year and their third quarterbacks of the year, they are in a race clearly to try to get the highest possible number. There's a great thing, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. There's also a 6 degrees of Paul Erdos, who's a famous mathematician who published so many papers. And there is actually a thing called the Bacon-Erdos number, which if you got someone like Natalie Portman, who's an academic as well as being an actress, the lowest number of degrees of separation between both of those people. The Colts and the Panthers are trying to get the Colt-Panther sequence of inconsistency, instability, and just pure chaos this season. And they're in a race to the bottom in that regard. Gentlemen, it has been an absolute joy as always. I wish you, all our listeners and viewers, all the merriest of Christmases. May all your heartbeats be white, or may all your Christmases be white. That's how the lyric goes. I want to thank you for your company tonight. Thank everyone for watching and for bearing with us through a lot of Christmas games to talk through. Don't ask me when they're actually on. Please look that up, because I have no clue. I don't know what day it is. I don't know what's happening. I'm just going to have food put in front of me and eat is my plan. Also want to thank our sponsors, as always, at Cassidy Travel for their continued support. And Merry Christmas, everyone, I think. Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas, everyone. Nolle Conagwiv Galair, and we will see you all after Christmas, where we will be back to discuss, debate, and preview the next set of games.
Happy Christmas, guys.